Dumelang. Good afternoon. Goeiemiddag. It's long in the day, so it's always a disadvantage to take this graveyard hour and try and get people to pay attention. But I thought that our panel really raised important challenges. But the questions that emerged from the audience raise even more challenges. And so our minds have been stretched in terms of the key challenges. I'm simply going to pick up what I thought I heard as being really at the heart of what we need to think about as we then later talk to what I have noted down as some of the key interventions we might think of. First, from Gertrude, the real key question is how do we close the gap between the rhetoric and the beautiful policies and principles of our Constitution and the everyday reality of an extraordinarily gender inequitable society we live in. And in that regard, Junaid talked about the structural issues and the agency issues. And so we have to return to those as we talk to the key interventions. And in terms of the agency issues, I would like us to frame them in terms of what we do at the personal level, what do we do at the professional level, and what we do at the political level. Because those are the three domains in which we can be agents of change. The second key challenge is the issue of culture. The attitudes, the behaviors, and the actions that people take for granted. And how do we deal with the absolute contradictory nature of what's in our Constitution in terms of rights and responsibilities and the traditional cultures that are common to many South Africans? And if you take all of the cultures in South Africa, one common feature is gender inequity across. It doesn't matter whether it's Jewish, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Hindu, whether it's African. One common feature. And in that regard, we have a particular virulent part of this traditional culture, which is the corrupted African culture. Corrupted in the sense that we are told that African culture cannot live side by side with the human rights culture. Now, I don't understand where that comes from. Which African culture is this that's being talked about? Because to have our parliament, post-apartheid parliament, putting forward a traditional cause bill, traditional leadership, what are they thinking? Because those bills are in direct contradiction to the values of our Constitution. So the corruption of traditional cultures is part and parcel of the structural problems that we face in our society. So what needs to change is that we, as women, as citizens, have to put ourselves out there as agents of change. Every day is an opportunity for change. And you cannot change out there if you haven't changed the person inside. So the personal is political. The personal, the professional are political. So the idea of depoliticizing gender equality has no meaning because citizens are by their very nature political entities. I'm not talking party politics, I'm talking political with a capital P. And we better get used to the idea that as women, if we want to change the nature of relationships between men and women, we've got to be prepared to enter the political domain, not in the party political sense, but in the active sense as citizens. Because at stake is a fantastic constitution that people like Gertrude and others who cross party political boundaries came together to make sure we had. But we are not leveraging that because we kind of take a backseat when it comes to the politics of gender. And the third challenge is, how do we talk of gender equality in a society that is structurally unequal? Is it possible? Is it possible to have gender equality where we got such gross inequalities in our society? I don't know how many of you have read a book by Richard Wilkinson called The Spirit Level. Now, if you haven't, you really should. It's beautiful reading, but it's also a wonderful argument for why inequality is bad for both rich and poor people. And he demonstrates through country studies. You look at, and it's all done graphically, so you can really read through it very quickly. Countries like Japan, Finland, Sweden are right up there as societies with great equality. And what do they benefit? They have the best outcomes in terms of life expectancy, low levels of crime, low levels of violence, etc. In the Scandinavian countries, as we know, they have very high levels of gender equality. It's not just in the attitudes and behaviors, but it's structured into their society. So we don't talk about maternity leave, we talk about paternity leave. Any parent can take leave, and they are treated exactly the same way. And so, what are the key interventions that we can take away from this wonderful discussion we've had here today? I'm sorry I missed the keynote speech. My first big intervention is that the agency of citizens is the most important change vector. Without citizens, and in this case, women as citizens, committing to being change agents, it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how many policies, how many beautiful constitutions, if you and I are not committing to being agents of that change, it's not going to happen. We need to commit, starting with ourselves. What is it that we are doing in our personal relationships, whether as mothers, as wives, as partners, as what have you, that perpetuate gender inequality? What are we doing at the personal level that perpetuates it? I mean, this discounting, my beautiful daughter, they was talking about how successful she is, but she says, I'm unqualified. What do you mean? What do you mean? You are accepting being defined by others as unqualified. You're qualified in what you're doing. And we really have to make sure that we don't discount our agency by always seeing what we don't have rather than what we have. An asset-based approach is what we as women need to learn to embrace. I was at the World Bank, I wasn't an economist. I didn't spend time and say, but I'm not an economist. No, I spent time saying, my understanding of human development is X, Y, Z. Boom. Didn't mean I didn't respect the economists, but I came there with a very clear mission, which was to help the World Bank to balance economic development with human development. And you immediately assume the role of being good at what you are doing, because You're not speaking about what you don't know. You're speaking about what you know. You listen to what you don't know when other people speak. So you learn also about the other areas that you are not aware. So that brings me to the definition. What is an empowered woman? An empowered woman is a woman who understands that she is the best that was created in terms of the person called Mamphele or Cynthia or Gertrude or whatever. If we start from that we are unique as entities that were created to add to this fantastic array of humanity, that starts you off on a positive. From then onwards, it's a question of building your asset base. I was always the smallest, the least physically able. I never wasted time on it. I never bothered to try and play sport. I couldn't. I used what God gave me, which was my brain. So you must play to your strength. But know your weaknesses. Don't deny them. Know them. But then you know that that's not going to disable you. I would recommend another book called The Athenian Principle. You know, we women have few role models of leaders. I mean, the woman was talking about being told, well, don't even think about leadership. Well, here's a woman who's been stupid enough not only to think of leadership, but she's 65. Now you are young, you can have everything. The whole future is ahead of you. But you realize that women bring something very special to leadership. The feminine in us brings in empathy, future orientation. You can't be pregnant for 9 months without thinking about the future, unless you are crazy. We have the ability to collaborate, to be a node around which families coalesce. We are less likely, under all things being equal, to drive competition to the point where we destroy which is good. And that is not because we are better than men, but because perhaps our socialization, but also I think the female hormones just operate differently. Okay? I mean, I speak as a mother of 2 boys. I've got nothing against boys. I love them dearly. But I know that testosterone has got different impact on the body than does estrogen. We need to leverage that. Be all woman. Don't try and wear pinstripe suits and... No! Be the woman that God created you to be. Yes, you can wear suits, but not in order to make that statement. But you have to really embrace this thing called woman. And it is power. Power. But for you to be able to move between the personal, the professional, and the political in a way that leverages one of the other, you've got to have harmony in terms of your values. The values that drive you at the personal level must be exactly the values that drive you at the professional level and at the political level. You can't say, I am going to make a difference when you are as untransparent, as unaccountable, as lacking in integrity, as disrespectful, as lacking in innovation, as mediocre as the rest of the traditional leadership, which happens to be male. So we as women coming into this domain have to be leveraging the highest value system, because that's what's going to give you the comparative advantage. Transparency, accountability, integrity, respect, innovation, excellence. So as you walk in, they just see it. You don't have to write here my values. You just be it. So we can't depoliticize gender equality. We've got to harmonize the values that work in the different domains. Because then as citizens, we must and we will and should be demanding that the values of the Constitution are in fact finding resonance in departments, in the national department, the provincial departments, and the local department. Now, there was also mention made of civic education, that we need to educate people about their rights and responsibilities. One of the biggest failures of post-apartheid South Africa is that here we are, I mean, Junaid as an HR person, you can't appoint someone in group 5 and not give them an orientation program. How did we appoint ourselves as citizens of a democracy when we came, all of us, from a non-democratic cultural dispense? No, we walked in, no orientation program, no, nothing. Are we surprised that our democracy is in such a sorry state? Because we did not invest in educating for democracy. So the idea of gender equality in isolation from civic education around the values of our Constitution, which includes gender equality, is not going to take. So we need to return to the base of making sure that civic education about rights and responsibilities is in the home, in the workplace, in the school system, in the religious institutions that we are part to, and the wider society. Can we change attitudes without getting men involved as fellow agents? I doubt. I've had a very interesting August, Women's Month. And I decided, at the prompting of some of the young volunteers in Aran, to have a men's forum. Boy, we think we've got problems? Try my sons and my grandsons. It's very, very serious. 70% of South Africa's children grow up in single-headed households. So they have no idea about what it is to be a man. They haven't seen a man in operation in relation to a woman. Second, they go to schools where teachers are involved in terrible relationships and or abuse. They live in environments which are abusive, where gender-based violence is an epidemic. Have a break. How do we expect these young men to grow up and be the men that are going to support us and be understanding? It's not possible. So I want to challenge Junaid and all the fellow male citizens here, and us as women. We really need to think much more strategically. If a woman is being beaten next door, and the men in the streets come together as part of the men's forum to go and stop that, they are more likely to succeed. And that man is least likely to repeat it, because there will be clear sanctions from the men in the street. It's common sense. So I really think we need to think very carefully about that we need to include men in the conversations, because they're being brought up by us, amongst us, that they are protectors, they are providers, they are leaders. Hello? In my family, I mean, I was brought up by very strong women, and it shows on my poor brothers. They have a hangover. Can you imagine now having a sister like me? It's a real problem. So we need to think about the human community as it is. You can't isolate women from this men-women relationship. So then my 3 final points. 1, can a patriarchal political system effectively transform the traditional culture that promotes gender inequity, gender-based violence, and objectification of women's bodies? Just look at our TV screens. Look at, I mean, it's really tragic that we have this beautiful constitution, but everything when you open the TV, open the newspaper, negation of all of the principles of our. Why? Because you and I, as women, are just happy to get that tender, right? But to get that tender, if you do it through objectifying yourself and your body, and we heard that here, we are perpetuating the same patriarchal system. So I'm afraid to say, Gertrude, your job is not done. 1992, we did it as women across party political lines came together and said, there is a crisis, we are going to go out and really stop this. We need to do the same today. This gender-based violence is not going to stop because we've got more police stations and more this and more that. It's going to stop when we, as women, supported by men who really care about these issues, stand up and say, enough. No more violation of women. And that's going to require organization. That's going to require political action. Not party political action. Now, I heard also the issue about women in engineering and how few were passing through our school system. Are we surprised? When we have an education system that says to our children, you are not smart like the rest of the world. You only need 30% you can pass. You don't have to do math. You do math literacy. And you know what? And you don't have to read books. We'll print out some stuff for you. Hey, we are generating mediocrity in this patriarchal political system. We are not going to see more women in engineering or women in any other of the real tough environments because we are just not producing men and women who are excellent. We are killing our children's genius. Day one they arrive, they are told, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why? My grandson will tell you, Kuru, why? Now, at least there is a basis for engagement. Now, these poor kids are intimidated out of their genius until by the time they get to grade 10, what is it called? Grade 12, they are completely, they are lacking in self-confidence, lacking in self-worth. Then 10% of them scrape into the university system where they find the same attitudes again. We really have a bigger problem than just women in engineering. We won't solve that problem unless we root out mediocrity out of our system. Again, going back to the notion, inequality hurts everybody. So you and I, upper middle class women, forget it. You're not going to reach your potential because we are not generating the pipeline of excellence in our system. Final word. Sustainable transformation is going to require us to deal with the structural issues and deal with the agency issues. But for that to happen, we need to mobilize to change the culture of our environments, at home, at work, streets, everywhere, to align them with the principles of our constitutional democracy. Until that realignment happens, we will continue to have magistrates who rape and are sitting on the bench, policemen who have committed crimes and are still on the job, because it doesn't matter. So, in my view, if we want sustainable transformation where men and women of this country can thrive, we better get going as agents of change. Thank you.